Today I'm showing you all my tips and tricks about priming 3D printed models. Priming is a crucial step that can not only make or break the final look of your prints, but also ruin hours of work. We'll look at the differences between solvent-based Redelcan and water-based primers and discuss which color works best for different top coat colors. So let's jump right in. First things first, let's talk about the two main types of primers, solvent-based Redelcans and water-based acrylics. Redelcan primers are perfect to cover a large surface area in no time, since they are actually made for bodywork on cars, which also makes them pretty cheap. On the other hand, if you spray a thumbnail big piece, most of the actual primer will go somewhere else and only a small amount will land on your part. Water-based acrylic primers applied with an airbrush are more efficient for smaller parts with very intricate details, and they are safer for both you and the environment since they don't contain those nasty solvents. And you can also apply them with a paintbrush. They dry faster and have no odor compared to their solvent-based counterparts. When choosing between the two, also consider your workspace conditions. I would only use Redelcan primers outside or with a good spray booth. But Redelcan primers have one big advantage other than you are faster covering your part. Let's take this resin printed bed to compare a water-based acrylic primer on the left with an automotive Redelcan primer on the right. After waiting a day to make sure that both are fully dry, I start with a sanding test. And you probably can't really see it, but with the water-based primer, the sandpaper tends to literally rip out small particles of the primer, whereas this doesn't happen to the solvent-based primer. So the solvent-based primer gives a much smoother surface after sanding. And you probably know that situation yourself. You think you're done with sanding and ready for priming, but after priming you find flaws again, which means you have to go back to sanding. And that can be a problem with the water-based primer. After sanding, you always need to make sure that all the sand dust and maybe grease from your hands is gone. For that I like to take alcohol. It removes grease and dust perfectly and it dries way faster than water. But what you can see in my next test is how the two different primers react to that alcohol. For the water-based primer, I can easily scratch it away with a Q-tip or toothpick, whereas the Redelcan primer needs much more force and a toothpick creates way less damage. To me, it feels like the water-based primer creates a rubbery coat around your object, whereas the Redelcan primer really bonds or fuses with the part. What you should also not do is to put a Redelcan primer or color on top of a water-based one, or else you could get this orange skin because the water-based color underneath the primer gets dissolved. For all those reasons, whenever I can, I use a solvent-based Redelcan primer. But the question we haven't asked yet is if a primer is really necessary at all, or if you can just skip it. The standard answer you get there is probably that the primer will make sure the paint adheres better to the surface. But to enable that, you first need to make sure that your part is dry, dust and grease free. Water somewhere in a recess, sanding dust or grease from a fingerprint can compromise the adhesion. If you don't take care of that, in the worst case it can happen, you mask something with masking tape later in your paint process, and when you remove the masking tape you rip all the paint and primer off. To test the difference between paint adhesion on a primed and unprimed part, I sprayed some basic blue color on an unprimed resin and an unprimed FDM printed part. And here you can see why color choice of your primer can be important. Blue on black unprimed PLA does not work at all. So I additionally took some gray paint. Then I let the paint dry for a day and tested if I can rip off the paint with masking tape on either the unprimed or primed side. But neither with directly ripping off the masking tape nor with letting it stick on the parts for a full day and then ripping it off had an influence on the paint. So from this sticking test, it looks like a good surface preparation is more important than using a primer, at least for paint adhesion. But there is more to it. Where it does make a difference is when your printed part has a non-uniform color. For this bed, I used epoxy sculpt to fix the drain holes, which creates a color difference to the actual print, and this color difference is influencing the tone of the blue color. So it still makes sense to use a primer to ensure the color consistency. And with that, let's come to the last part, choosing the right primer color. The color you choose can significantly impact the final appearance of your print. Here's a quick guide. White primer is ideal for lighter colored top coats. It enhances vibrancy and helps colors pop. It's also great for achieving true color representation. Gray primer is a versatile option that works well with a wide range of top coat colors. Gray primers provide a natural base, making them suitable for both light and dark colors. Black primer is perfect for darker top coats. Black primer adds depth and richness to the final color. It's particularly useful when working with metallic or glossy finishes. And I also like to use black for organic and very complex shapes where you could miss some parts with your actual color later. A bright primer will directly show that flaw later, whereas a black primer hides it, by basically just creating a shadow in that spot. When you use an airbrush, you can get away with most of the primer colors. Here you can see the difference between a skin coat on a black and gray primed head. The difference is pretty subtle. Also, the metallic gold works on both gray and black when using an airbrush. However, if you use a paintbrush, after the first round of applying yellow on that Superman logo, you can see that more of black shows through. And it needs a couple of passes until the color is uniform. And it's even more evident if you do the same with metallics. This silver looks really weak on gray, but pretty good on black right after the first coat. And an even bigger difference can be seen if you use the dry brush method. And here you have it, our comprehensive guide to priming your 3D printed models. Remember to choose the right primer type and color for your specific needs. My go-to are the solvent-based rattle can primers, and I avoid water-based ones whenever I can. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more content, and hit that notification bell to stay updated. And please guys, give me a comment for the algorithm, and I'll catch you in the next video.